Do you need a landscaping job tackled? Keen Landscaping is a family-owned and operated full-service landscaping company based in Dallas, Texas. Anything from property restoration and tree pruning or removal to landscape design, construction, and installation, Keen covers it all. They're also the official landscape company of the Dallas Stars. Learn more at keenlandscaping.com. Again, that's Keane landscaping.com. Welcome to Parker's MMA Show. If you want to learn about all things going down in the fight world, you've come to the right place. Each episode, your host Parker Keane will take a deeper dive into the always entertaining world of sanctioned fist fighting. Now here's your host, Parker Keane.
So today we are interviewing Bellator heavyweight Tim Johnson. Tim is 15-6. He's 35 years old. Fighting out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Extreme Couture product. He is 3-2 overall in Bellator after going 3-3 in the UFC before that. But he is on a 3-fight winning streak, and he is set to be the next number one contender for the Bellator heavyweight belt against Ryan Bader. So we're going to talk to him about that, about his upbringing in rural Minnesota, and everything in between. So talk a little bit about your time doing JUCO and Division II wrestling, right? We see a lot of guys coming that route now in MMA, right? Coming from that, not just a wrestling background, but a collegiate wrestling background. How do you think that kind of shapes both yourself and just fighters in general for kind of the work ethic it takes to be a high-level MMA guy?
I think that's the main thing is if you're wrestling in college, you know how to work. You have a lot of, it's not just even work. It's just you have a different grit about you that some other sports that might be you're only going to find that in, one in every 10 athletes. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a number, but with wrestlers, it seems like if you make it to the collegiate level, they all kind of have that. At the same token, like wrestling's like probably the best base you can have because there's arguments and everything, but I think sometimes like some really high level wrestlers forget it's a fight and don't move along their other other aspects of their other fight game.
And to that token, I mean, you're obviously you're fighting with Bellator now, and we've seen this with the UFC, with Bellator, with the PFL, where you see this almost a pipeline from the high level Division I wrestling and even these Division II All-Americans go straight into MMA. Do you think we're headed towards kind of a world where the same way we look at, college football for the NFL or college basketball for the NBA, we start to think about collegiate wrestling as, a avenue or a place where we can watch, kind of the future champions of MMA?
I think to a point you can, but there's a lot of fighters there's a lot of wrestlers that, they just wrestle and they're getting their degrees and they go on, they have no, it's not like watching NCAA football where, every one of those players is trying to make the NFL. A little different in that aspect, but I think we're already kind of doing that. I don't think if you ask anyone, they were like, last year's Olympic team, what would you want to see them in a cage? I think everyone would kind of be like, yeah, absolutely. But and I see college wrestlers getting asked like in their junior, seniors years, they're looking into doing martial arts and stuff. People are already, kind of dig and pry for that kind of to your token. To figure out if we get to see them in the cage or not.
So tell us a little bit about that transition. Obviously, you're a wrestler, and then it sounds like you just kind of stumbled into fighting. How was that transition from collegiate wrestling to becoming a pro fighter?
It was a pretty easy transition overall. It was the work ethic. The work's the same, but it's different. Same but different. And what I say, like when I was talking about other fighters, some wrestlers sometimes forget to, get around their other skills. My first UFC fight, I still didn't know how to throw a 1-2-3. Like I had no idea. I seriously had no idea what the fuck I was doing out there. And now finally things are starting to get comfortable with my boxing. But yeah, those first, my first handful of fights, I fucking had zero striking.
Just straight wrestling and bodying people.
Yeah, exactly.
So
awesome.
you go 7-1 to start your career, and we're here now. You're basically learning on the job at that point, right?
Yeah.
Very much learning in the cage, and you finally get to the UFC. What does that moment feel like? Like, was that a thing that you kind of dreamed about getting to the UFC, or was it kind of like this just natural progression of a athletic career that you kind of stumbled upon?
Yeah, I assure you, I never had any aspirations to be a professional fighter. And that's where I stumbled out. I was done wrestling, but I'm a competitor, and I'm like, oh, this is another thing to compete. And I just started rattling off wins, and then rattling off wins against better opponents, and all of a sudden in the UFC. Yeah, it's pretty scary because, like I said, I couldn't throw a punch. I'm going, God, do I belong in the UFC? Like that was my mindset. My first handful of fights is going, God, dude, am I good enough to be here? Is this real?
So what was the plan B? Obviously, it kind of sounds like you just stumbled into fighting. When wrestling was done, what did you think you were going to do before you became a pro fighter?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I was working two jobs while I was in the UFC. I drove truck and I worked as a bouncer while I was with the UFC. And then on top of training, so I was getting like 80-hour work weeks in if I include my training.
Jesus.
But yeah, no, I always liked driving truck. I always did little jobs here for 5-6 months and find something else. I did road construction for like 8 years. Work in the agricultural field. I still go back now every fall and spring to help out for planting seasons and harvest. So that's probably after this career is done, I'll probably go back into that. But yeah, I always kind of had all kinds of different things.
Huh. Interesting.
So you're in the UFC. You still feel like you don't know how to box. You're working two other jobs. You end up going 3-3 over 3 years against 4-3 over 3 years, and what many people consider probably the best group of heavyweights in the world during the time that you were in there, right?
Yeah.
What are you proudest of from that time in the UFC?
Probably my tenure. Being a kind of a I don't like the term, but I kind of killed a lot of prospects, I guess. I always like being an underdog, and when people don't expect much from me. And the UFC would throw me either, you look at two ways. They either wanted to gauge who they had because they knew I was durable, or they wanted them to beat me so they could cut me. I'm not sure, but yeah, I guess probably just my tenure in it. There's only a handful, thousands of people I can say they made it up there, and I'm fine with our departure from each other. I'm loving it over at Bellator right now. I can tell you that.
Do you have anything that you regret or that you wish you could change from those 3 years?
I wish I would have came out to Vegas sooner in my career. I was training in Fargo, North Dakota, and I had a good set of heavyweights up there, but it's not the same. I wish I would have made the move earlier in my career.
So let's talk a little bit about the transition to Bellator. You're now with Bellator. So how was that transition from the UFC? And talk about just some differences of the organizations as a whole, since you've fought under both banners now.
I did. I've been asked this question probably 100 times, and I think the easiest thing, and my biggest thing that I pick apart is Bellator is it's smaller, a little more personable. I really had a big problem, I could get a hold of Scott Coker if I needed to. If I had a big problem, there's no way I'd be able to talk to Dana White. Absolutely not. I was too low on the totem pole, and he allows himself to be open to the upper tier kind of guys.
Right.
So speaking of, you make the move to Bellator. You go 3-2 over your first 5 fights, but you won 3 in a row now. Your only loss you haven't avenged, if you think about it, Tim, is the loss to Vitaly Minakov. Is there any desire in the back of your mind, like that's one that you really want to get back? I know you're not the type of guy to do a call out or talk trash or anything, but does the competitor in you want that Minakov fight back?
Not at the moment. I got my sights set on something bigger. If that fight goes well, then I gladly accept a rematch with them after my next fight, hopefully.
So I assume you're talking about, you have your eyes on that heavyweight title with Ryan Bader.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your assessment of Ryan Bader? We obviously saw he got beat pretty badly, in my opinion, by Vadim Nemkov. It's obviously a very different fighter from who you are. I'm not going to underestimate your speed here, Tim, but I think Vadim is pretty quick to the punch.
You're not going to hurt my feelings. Don't worry.
What do you make of Ryan Bader at this point of his career, and how do you assess him as someone who, quite frankly, has a similar skill set with power shots on the feet and great wrestling?
Actually, people have been asking me about Bader even before my last couple wins. I was a bit of a fanboy of Bader when he was at the UFC before I was at the UFC, because he was kind of my type of fighter. He's not fancy. He does like 4 or 5 different combinations, but it's consistent, and he's more of a gritty fighter than a flashy fighter. And that from that point of view, I always respected that more, because it's kind of a different mentality, I think. And from his Nemkov fight, I think what you saw was, and this is outsider looking in, he won the light heavyweight belt, came out to heavyweight, put on a little more mass, a little more weight. And when he made the drop back down to light heavyweight, I think it might have been a little harder on him than he maybe wants to admit. And he was just a little slower than what he originally was because he went up to heavyweight. And that's just my 2 cents looking as an athlete. But with that said, he is going to be a heck of a lot faster than most heavyweights.
All right, so you'd mentioned it previously, but have you now made the full-time transition to Las Vegas, where you're training there at Extreme Couture?
Yep. 2 years ago, moved out.
So how has that change in camp affected your overall game with, training with people of the likes of Francis Ngannou, Roy Nelson, some of the best heavyweights in the world?
It's, iron sharpens iron. Coaches get you to a certain point, but it's all about your training partners.
Right.
And, you can train different combinations, all that type of stuff with your coaches, but they're not the ones sitting across from you. You never want to be the best one in the room, and I definitely am not at Extreme Couture. And yeah, and with Francis, sparring him, all the nerves are gone. I know, I'm not gonna get hit any harder in a fight than I do in the practice room. So yeah, that's a
good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Nice luxury to have Francis Ngannou to provide that power, though.
Yeah, because... I know.
Anyway, so I saw on your Instagram, I think you recently had a baby girl.
Yep. She is 2 weeks old tomorrow.
Very cool. Well, we wanted to congratulate you on that, and I wanted to ask you, is that your first kid?
This is my first, yeah.
Okay, so how do you think welcoming a new baby girl into the world is going to affect your fighting career moving forward, or the way you look at fighting in general?
I think it already has. I found out we were pregnant, the last week of January, right before Tyrell Fortune, and then Matt Mitrione, and then Chad Congo. It's not just fighting for me or anything. I'm trying to make a living, get some make money while I can, while my body's still allowing me to, and help us out with make our future a little brighter.
Awesome. My next question: do you have any hobbies you do outside of fighting?
Yeah, during the summer I like to get back to Minnesota and get on all the lakes up there and do some fishing. But during the winter I love snowmobiling.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so yeah, head up to the mountains and do some climbing and find some powder and let her rip.
Very awesome. All right, as a pro fighter, what are some of the biggest perks? And along with that, what are some of the most negative parts of being a fighter or downsides?
I guess the bigger perks is, what are there? Is there perks to being a fighter?
I don't know.
It's being able to compete with someone. Some other guys might have different perspectives. To me, it's, I don't ever hate the guy across from me. It's just a competition. I want to test my skills out against another person's skills. And I think to its core, that's, all competitors really want to do. The negatives is you got to be selfish. You got to miss a lot of stuff. You got to miss friend stuff. You got to miss family stuff. There's stuff that you can't do with other people just because your training doesn't allow it. And to a point, you feel bad about it, but there's only a small window you have to do that. So it's worth it.
For sure.
Obviously, Tim, you had a unorthodox kind of entry into this sport, and obviously a meteoric rise in a lot of respects. What would be your advice for a young fighter, someone who's kind of just fresh in this sport? Maybe they've taken a couple amateur fights. what do you think is something that you wish you knew earlier, or just advice that you kind of carried along the way with you?
Don't always be a yes man. Don't always be a company man. Because if you think that favors can come back your way, they don't always do. Don't sell yourself short. Like, don't know your worth. That's for sure. It's something that, it took me a while to figure out. And, good, a loss versus a good guy is better than a win over a crappy guy.
Final question here, Tim. The people have been asking. We've brought it up on the podcast multiple times. I think you know what's coming. What happened to the mustache?
It was time. It was new. Yeah, new organization, new no more theatrics, and But I'm bringing out different. I brought out a full beard, then 5 o'clock shadow. But for the mustache, will be back because I'm planning on rejoining the military. So that's the only facial hair I can grow.
So what capacity are you going to rejoin the military?
I'll be the National Guard again. So
very cool. All right, I've got one more for you, and then we'll get you out of here. What is the one biggest issue you see with MMA as a whole, and what would you do to change it or fix it?
And put me on the spot there. MMA as a whole. I think it should be a lot. I mean, there should be inter-promotional fights should be not frowned upon. Those should be embraced more, I think. Like Bellator does it with one quite a bit, or Risen. Which one do they do it with?
Yeah.
I can't.
Ryzen.
Yeah, Ryzen. Yeah, they do it with them quite a bit. But it's more eyes on the fight, the more butts in the seat. It's best for both of them. It's like putting a Starbucks next to another coffee shop. They both succeed.
Would you be in favor of MMA fighters being recognized under the Ali Act, where you have the people who determine the rankings and the championships have to be separate from the promoters?
I think absolutely. I don't think there's anything really wrong with the Ali Act. I think it's there for the only people that really don't like that's promoters, or it's there for fighters. Any fighter that says the Ali Act, they don't want the Ali Act, because it's like voting themselves out of a job.
Yeah. All righty. Well, I think. Go ahead. You got one more?
When can we expect to hear Hillbilly Deluxe blaring from the arena and watching you walk to the Bellator cage again?
Not sure. They're going to finish. I think Bellator's finishing out their year right now, and they're going to be working on their next year stuff here. But Ryan, he called me out on Facebook. He wants to fight me for the belt early next year, and I said, yeah, let's do this. So, I mean, ideally, I'd love a February, March fight, and turn around and fight again, April, May, and yeah.
That's all from me, Park. Anything else?
Yeah, no, Tim, I'm good. We appreciate you coming on here. Appreciate your time. Where can people find you on social media, and any shout out to your sponsors?
Let me see. They can find me on Instagram at tbeartim. Twitter's the same. And sponsors H&I Nutrition, Burbiz Events, Texas Oil Group, and basically it's my gym, Academy of Combat Arts in Fargo, and Extreme Couture here in Vegas.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate the time. We look forward to you getting that title shot, and best of luck to you.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Texas Trees is the premier tree care company in the DFW area. Whether you need basic maintenance or specialized services, when it comes to trees, we've got you covered. Pruning, chipping, bracing, and cabling, even root barriers and disease control, we do it all. And if you aren't sure what you need, we have certified arborists on staff to point you in the right direction. Visit us at northtexastrees.net. That's northtexastrees.net. Thanks for listening to Parker's MMA Show. Take a moment to rate and review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit ParkerKeen'sMMAShow.podbean.com for additional information on Parker and to stay up to date on the latest drama in the fight world. For more information and important links about today's episode, check out the show notes.